Hi everyone, welcome to my new video where I quickly explain to you the different types of studies involved in descriptive research. Knowledge from this video can be very useful for you so that you can imbibe the principles of descriptive research in your own studies and present your data effectively. Now previously I have made a video on descriptive research where I have explained the advantages, disadvantages, given examples, explained the methodology behind it, and the link to that video is in the description section below. In this video I will mainly focus on the four different types of studies that can be used in descriptive research. So the first one is of course a case study or a case report. So a case series describes the person, place and time information about a group of cases. It can be retrospective, that is looking back in time, or prospective, that is looking forward in time, and it usually involves a small number of patients. So case reports and series permit discovery of, let's say, new diseases, unexpected effects, and provide data for generating hypotheses. Although you may say that the generalizability of the findings is limited because of selection bias and lack of controls. So selection bias is of course when you target a particular group or a sample of people. So data from a case series may be used in analytical studies to investigate possible causal factors. There are descriptive studies of one or a series of patients defined by certain eligibility criteria and where the unfolding course of events such as disease progression, therapies, outcomes of therapies is described in detail and where interventions are not manipulated. Now, this study design is used to provide a detailed description of an uncommon disease or condition, a specific situation, or unique therapeutic approaches. So, the example that you see on your screen could be like a pilot program which has been implemented to improve school-based mental health services. And it was instigated in, let's say, one elementary school or one middle and high school, or one elementary and one middle and high school. Now, the case study that followed the program from development through to implementation, documenting each step of the process. Another example of a case study could be, let's say you are trying to study the exposure therapy for fear in humans. So that fear could be fear of spiders or fear of ghosts or fear of the dark, and you could be investigating that in adults who already have learning disabilities of some kind. So you can study one person where the person is asked to complete a pre-intervention study, and then you carry out an intervention and do another post-intervention questionnaire. From the results of this data, the exposure therapy intervention or whatever intervention was carried out then can be found to be effective in reducing the phobia or the fear or not. Now, this case report will highlight a therapy that could be used to assist people with learning disabilities who also suffered from phobias or fears. Then we have cross-sectional study, which is a type of research design in which you collect data from many different individuals at a single point in time. In cross-sectional research, you will observe variables without making any attempt to influence them. So researchers in economics, psychology, medicine, epidemiology, and other social sciences all make use of cross-section studies in their work. Now, for example, you can think of epidemiologists who are interested in the current prevalence of a disease in a certain subset of the population. They might use a cross-sectional design to gather and analyze the relevant data. For example, if certain epidemiologists are trying to study if there is a current prevalence of, let's say, COVID-19 on people who uh, stay on the islands. Is it less? Is it more? Or they could be studying sexually transmitted disease and doing a study on people who stay on islands like an island like Maldives and an island like Mauritius or Sri Lanka or something like that. So it could also be where a medical study is being carried out to examine the relevance or prevalence rather of cancer amongst a defined population. So the researcher can then evaluate people of different ages, ethnicities, geographical location and social backgrounds. Another study is the ecological study. So ecological studies, they are also sometimes called correlational study design, and they involve looking for association between an exposure and an outcome across population rather than in individuals. So you can see the differences between each of these, isn't it? So you can see that in case studies you were looking at sometimes one person. You could look at one person as well. In cross-sectional you are trying to gather data from many individuals at a single point in time. And in ecological studies, you are looking for association between an exposure and an outcome across the population rather than individual. So here you can have an example where maybe you carry out a study in the United States trying to find a correlation between household firearm ownership in various states and the firearm related death rate deaths during a certain period. So then in this study, the unit of assessment will be a state and not an individual. So you can look at states which are predominantly carrying firearms or guns in their households and seeing how many deaths are related to these firearms in that particular state to get some kind of a correlational study going on. And then you can do individual studies in different states and do a comparison as well. So these studies are convenient to do since the data have often already been collected and it is available from a reliable source. Now this design is particularly useful when the differences in exposure between individuals within a group are much smaller than the differences in exposure between groups. Alright, so for example, the intake of a particular food item is likely to vary less between people in particular group but can vary widely across groups. For example, people living in different countries. So let's say a certain intake of a particular food item. So in Australia, we have something like Vegemite. It's very particular to Australia. So maybe in Australia, the intake of Vegemite is going to be much larger in a population than people in different countries. So of course, there are certain limitations with this study as well. So an association between exposure and outcome at the group level may not be true at the individual level, or the association may be related to a third factor, which in turn is related to both the exposure and the outcome, and therefore the confounding variables can result. So an example being an ecological association between higher income level and greater cardiovascular mortality across countries may be related to a higher prevalence of obesity, or migration of people between regions with different exposure levels may also introduce an error. So you have to think about all these things. Finally, we have incident-related studies or incidence studies. So incident study is set up to investigate the incidence of a disease by measuring the number of new cases of a disease or condition during a specific time in a specific population. So one advantage of these kind of studies is that they allow calculation of true rates of diseases occurrence for a better estimation of risk. So again, you can think of examples of incident cases where persons are developing diabetes in a certain population, or persons are becoming infected with HIV, or they are starting to smoke heavily, or more people are being admitted in the hospital in a certain specific population. So in each of these situations, individuals transition from an occurrence-free state to a certain occurrence. That's why it's called an incidence study, where an incidence takes place. Or you can say that an example of incidence would be, say, 800,000 new strokes in the United States annually. So 8,000 people are suffering from new strokes in United States annually. So here the incidence is 800,000 new strokes and the population in the United States, and the time frame is 1 year. So alternatively, you can say that incidence can be specified as person by years. So these are the different types of studies we used in descriptive research. If there is something that you didn't understand, or if my examples weren't clear enough for you to understand, let me know in the comment section. I'll try to provide some different examples. I try to keep these videos short so that you don't get too bored. But if you need any kind of elaboration on any of these topics or any of these types of descriptive research, please let me know in the comment section so that I can make videos on that. I will make more videos on descriptive research in the future, but I want to keep them short so that you guys don't get bored. Alright, thank you for watching today's video. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you soon with my next video. Bye for now.